Hey, so good to see you all. All right.
Diane, is that you there? Oh my goodness, how sweet to see you. For those of you that don't know, Diane and I worked together as nurses for a very long time together. It's really nice to see you.
So, with great respect and with great kindness, it's a pleasure to welcome you all to Spirit Rock. Welcome to today's drop in women's class with our teacher, Eileen Spillane. Grace will be back next week, I believe. I hope so. And so will Carlita. This class goes from 10 a.m. to 12 noon Pacific time. We do refer to all times as Pacific. To give us a feel for who we're sitting with today. Let me make sure I left chat open. Let us know where you're calling in from. Yes, there you go. Because this class brings folks from all over the place. Spirit Rock is located both online globally and on land in the San Geronimo Valley, which is part of unceded Coast Miwok ancestral territory. That's in Northern California. When we say welcome, we welcome you all parts of you, your color, your culture, your beliefs, your gender, orientations, abilities, ages, education, economies, wholehearted or brokenhearted. Please take your place in this gorgeous circle today. If we haven't met yet, if you're new, also let us know in chat that you're new. My name's Maria Cristina Tavera. Folks call me Christina. I get to be your host. Carlita, who is your regular host, should be back again next week. I want to say thank you for your generous donations and registration fees to Spirit Rock. They keep us being able to offer these online and on land teachings. Your fees also go to support our teacher today, so thank you. Let's quickly go over some things. Those of you who've been here before have heard these. Time to go get a cup of coffee or refresh your water. For those of you who are new, we do maintain the serenity of our global meditation hall by putting you on mute, and the chat will come to the host only. Teacher sound has been optimized, but I have put on the closed captioning. You can turn that on and off. Look for those closed captioning tabs down in your Zoom window. If you don't know how to find that, just let me know. You should be able to find me up at host. There will be an opportunity for sharing closer to the end of today, so please hold on to your questions. And participant link will be in the chat. That will help you find the teacher later or look up some of the references that she has shared. Two amazing opportunities this coming up in the next 2 weeks that you should know about. The very first is a half-day session with Doctora Margarita Loynaz. She is a Latinx elder who had an awakening experience while she was a young girl on the beach in Dominican Republic, one of the very few elder Latina teachers that we have. Her class is called Staying Open at the Edge of Experience. You might want to check that out. The other class that I would tell everyone to just sign up for, even if you can't make the day, get the recording, is the Saturday, August 24th, Donna Day. That's a donation day with Spencer Sherman and Dharma teacher Diana Winston. They are offering the middle way to financial well-being. Spencer teaches this class. It's a Donna-based class every January. Every January, we get close to 500 or 600 folks who register for this class. And it's not as challenging as you might think, given that it's a money class. Spencer is a community Dharma leader, teacher, and he is really into the whole philosophy of abundance and the Dharma. So you might want to just register for that. Again, donation, no donation, but you'll get a copy of the recording if you can't make that day, and totally worth it. Today, I get to welcome back our teacher, Eileen Spillane. Eileen is an RN, and she's a founder of Befriending Death, normalizing conversations around death and dying. She's worked as a critical care, oncology, and obstetrics nurse for over 30 years. Eileen has learned to be present with suffering and bring ease to difficulty with compassion, authenticity, humor. She's a guide for an active travel company that takes people on hiking and biking trips in the summer. And she also loves working with the elements and seeing teachings reflected in nature. She finds refuge in self compassion, a sense of humor, and the Brahma Viharas. Bienvenida. Welcome back, Eileen. It's nice to have you here again.
Thank you so much, Christina. And I just want to second your endorsement of Spencer Sherman's workshops because I actually had the honor of studying with Spencer in our extended Dharma program, and um, I took his Dharma and Money retreat, and I'm like mostly financially sound, but I was thinking, do I even need to be doing this? I signed up for it. I was in tears. I had gratitude. I mean, he really takes you into a place around money that is not scary. He kind of holds your hand with it. So, and Diana Winston, what a lovely pairing with him. So yeah, I just would have you check that out. So, and he's actually Spencer is part of my teaching team for a new program that I'm offering next month. It's a year-long program called Befriending Death, Befriending Your Life. And Spencer will come and speak about legacy and that it's way beyond just financial legacy. It's just kind of like how are we showing up with our virtues in life, and what are sometimes we think about our resume virtues rather than our eulogy virtues, and what are the qualities that we're living that people will remember us for. So yeah, I'm a big fan of Spencer. Yeah. So what we'll do is we'll just start out with just a landing sit to just arrive together. If you haven't put yourself on gallery view, you can kind of look around and maybe see some familiar faces or recognize the new faces that are here. And we'll just sit together for about 10 minutes and then have a moving meditation where it's your movement of choice. And I'll give a little bit of guidance around that. So I'll just ring the bell once to get us started, and then three times just before we transition to our movement. And then we'll have a little bit of a Dharma talk. And the best part is you sharing and you being part of the Sangha and connecting and offering your reflections or questions or comments. So, does that sound good to you all? Alrighty. So just allowing that sound to fade into the background, and connecting in with the breath. Not necessarily changing the breath, just accepting how the breath is in this moment. And gently scanning the body, noticing areas of holding or tension. Just inviting the body to soften, releasing any tension. Allowing the belly to be soft and the shoulders to be relaxed. And if the mind feels busy and off in thought, you can just note thinking, planning. Just come back to your anchor in the breath or the body. Just noticing what you're aware of right now as we move into our mindful movement practice. And so sometimes with mindfulness, we bring our mindfulness to the cushion or to our seat, and then we turn our mindfulness off in transition until the next mindfulness exercise. So I'm going to encourage you to move really slowly in this transition, being aware of the subtle movements in transition, and welcome you to a mindful movement of your choice for the next 20 minutes. And that could be as simple as really small steps in a walking practice with no destination to go anywhere. If you have the opportunity to go outside for the next 20 minutes and take in the elements of nature, taking in the sounds and the smells, the breath, feeling the air, feeling the sun or the coolness, letting that be part of your experience. You're welcome to do dance. You're welcome to do stretching or yoga, whatever practice feels resonant for you. And the only bit of advice is just to take it slower than you normally would, unless you have a restless energy and that needs a different pace for you. And if your body is not in a state that supports movement, you're welcome to stay seated and do movement in your seat if that feels most supportive for you. So we'll come back in about 20 minutes at the 40 of whatever. Yeah, thanks Christina for putting that in there. And I'll just ring the bell to bring more awareness to keeping that mindfulness in our transition mode. Back to our practice formally. We'll be sitting for about 30 minutes. I hope your movement practice was fruitful. And I'll just give a little bit of guidance in the beginning. I know there's probably some very experienced meditators, but if you're new to meditation, you can really just keep it simple with picking one anchor, whether it be your breath or your body. That can be really helpful and less overwhelming. So again, just finding a posture that feels supportive, relaxed, and alert. And feeling the heaviness of the body. Allowing that heaviness to ground you. Feeling the earth element that's alive in the body. Connecting to your seat. And inviting the posture to be soft. And connecting in with the breath as it is in this moment. Noticing where the breath is most alive for you in awareness. For some, that's the air coming in at the nostrils or the mouth, or the expansion of the rib cage. The rise and fall of the belly. You can even put your hand on your belly if that feels like that brings more awareness of the breath. And for some of us, it's the whole flow of the breath of the body. You can keep your attention on one of those parts, keeping it simple. And if you have a sense of stability and concentration, you can practice with open awareness, meeting the moment as it arises, aware of sound coming and going, aware of thoughts coming and going, or emotions, resting in the breath or the body. You might also notice the Vedana or the feeling tone of, oh, that feels pleasant, or that feels unpleasant, or that feels neutral. Just meeting your experience for what you need of keeping it simple or bringing some investigative curiosity. with a sense of gentleness. Just notice where your mind is right now. Where is your attention? If you're distracted, you can come back to your seat, the gravity of your seat, the breath, or sound, holding it with a sense of kindness. Thank you for your practice. So today I thought we would talk a little bit about right livelihood. And for those of you that are familiar with the Eightfold Path, for me, right livelihood feels like more accessible, more relatable than some of the other parts of the Eightfold Path that the Buddha gave as a prescription for less suffering. If we're aligned with right speech, right intention, right mindfulness, all of these things. And for me, the right livelihood feels more relatable in a way. And if you are in a situation where you're not in a traditional work role, um, I'd like to expand the idea of livelihood as not just what you're doing to earn a living, but if it's caretaking, if it's volunteer work, if it's being a community member, being a Sangha member, like you all are here. These are all ways of spending our time. And so to me, that's part of right livelihood. It's not just a traditional work role. And Bhikkhu Bodhi has translated a lot of the teachings of the Buddha, and his he speaks of this right livelihood as it's concerned with how one earns a living in a righteous way. That wealth should be gained in accordance with certain standards by legal means. So not earning things illegally. And we can look at it from a very broad view, or we can start like peeling the onion and looking at these little subtle ways of like, did I not claim that on my tax return? Or the little subtleties that kind of creep in, um, and that one should acquire livelihood in a peaceful manner without coercion or violence, that it would be done honestly, without deceit, and in a way that does not entail harm or suffering for others. And when the Buddha spoke to the people, and you have to place yourself back 2,500 years ago. So some of the things that we do for work are not the same as they were 2,500 years ago. But he gave some guidance around the kind of livelihood which brings harm to others. So things to be avoided is we're dealing in weapons, dealing with living beings, or for example, like raising animals for slaughter, or slave trade, or prostitution in the meat production, or butchery, in poisons and intoxicants. And those would be to be avoided. And any occupation that requires a violation of right speech or right action is a form of wrong livelihood. Um, selling weapons or intoxicants, they may not violate those factors, but yet they can be wrong because there's other consequences for people. And in the Thai tradition, there's a treaty that discusses the positive aspects of right livelihood under three headings, regarding actions, regarding rightness, regarding people, and rightness regarding objects. And so when we think of ways that we encounter others in the world, in all the different ways that we show up in community, in what ways are we doing harm to others or suffering for ourselves? And that might even be as simple as a Facebook post, as we're in this year of election. There might be some family members or people in your community that might see things a bit differently than you. And for me, sometimes that requires a little bit more attention towards right speech. And okay, maybe I should pause before I have this conversation, whether it's in person or through social media or a text. And in what way do we live that supports ourselves or in what way are we causing ourselves suffering? What are the purposes for which we work or volunteer or spend our time? What's our intention around that? Um, sometimes it's because it feels good. It feels good to the ego sometimes to feel needed, or to be of service, and it could come genuinely out of the heart of a bountiful heart of wanting to care. But sometimes it's helpful to examine what's underneath there of like, oh, I like to rescue people and it feels good to be needed, or they're going to value me. They're going to think higher of me. If I say this way, they'll think I'm smart, or I'll be part of their community. They'll want to spend time with me. Just like kind of looking at what are our motivations behind our actions, and what are our values? Are our values aligned with our work or activities, or how we show up? And how does that have an impact on our inner life? What are the consequences in the world? um is it contributing to skillful means, or is it contributing to unskillful means? And um is it creating more joy and satisfaction and meaning for us? And so what I like to do, because my mind spends a lot of time reflecting on death, because I've for the last 3 years I've been teaching death and dying classes. I teach a course called Let's Chat About Death, and now I'm teaching coming up in the next month or so a course on it's a year-long course called Befriending Death, Befriending Your Life. And I like to think of Right Livelihood as an opportunity to look at, how am I living this life in a way that when my time does come and I am on my deathbed, that I can reflect and look back on a life well lived, or I can die with a sense of ease and less regret. And I like to take that, the Right Livelihood, and kind of look at that in a way of like, how ethical am I living right now? And it doesn't mean you have to have a squeaky clean, life where you haven't made a mistake or you haven't harmed a person. We're bringing that sense of compassion and humanness to us. Of course, we're going to be making mistakes here and there and offending people, and we're not always going to be so perfect. Um, but what I wanted to do today is take Bhikkhu Bodhi's interpretation of Right Livelihood and um, marry that with Bronnie Ware's famous Regrets of the Dying. And so maybe some of you are not familiar with it, so I'll just name the five. She spent a lifetime of being with people in their dying moments, and she found these themes, and they were the five regrets of the dying that she speaks of. And the first one is, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. And the second is, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. The third, I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. And the fourth, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. And the last one, I wish I let myself be happier. And so for some of you, you might be hearing that and thinking like, yeah, I can relate to that one, or no, you know what, I did well in that category. I can feel pretty good about that for myself. So just to unpack it, I'll just go through each one again. Um, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. And I think for women, that sometimes can be hard, where especially for mothers. I'm not a mother, but you end up putting a lot of people before your needs, and sometimes you adapt. You're a chameleon to adapt to the environment that you're in, make everything, be a peacemaker, not ruffle the feathers. And sometimes it's not until we're of a certain age that we realize, wow, I haven't really been authentic in a way. I haven't really been true to myself. And what is it going to take for me to do so now? Elizabeth Kubler-Ross has a book, I believe she wrote it with David Kessler, called Life Lessons. And she speaks of life being a pie. And she says, we give a piece of the pie to our parents, we give a piece of pie to our loved ones, we give a piece to our children, we give a piece of the pie to our career, maybe our spirituality. You can divide your pie up into however that resonates for you. But then Kubler-Ross says at the end of life, some people haven't saved a piece of pie for themselves, and some people don't even know what kind of pie they are. And so, she says, I know what kind of pie I am. And that's something that we each have to discover for ourselves. It's this inquiry of knowing who we are. And we don't have to wait until we're dying to find out what kind of pie we are. We can bring that investigative quality by scanning our life, perhaps doing a life review. I do that every end of the year. I don't do New Year's resolutions. I reflect on, what have I learned this year? What am I proud of accomplishing this year? What were some of the mistakes or the regrets of this year? And allowing that to be informing my life and informing my living, you know. So taking that on and thinking about, like, how can I be true to myself? What is it going to take? And what are the self-care practices perhaps that we can bring in, both personally and professionally, in whatever manner professionally means for you. Maybe it's a volunteer gig and you're like, wow, I'm doing a lot here. I'm really overextending myself here, or it doesn't seem like everybody's playing the same way on the team here. And perhaps it's learning how to have some boundaries. Perhaps it's about, prioritizing self-care and, like, literally plugging it into the calendar. So the second being, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. And Bronnie speaks of this being a trend that she found more common with men. But that's changing. We're not always functioning in the traditional gender roles anymore. And particularly, there's all these books about how does she do it? How does she do it? It's like, how does she work full-time job and still take care of the children and still show up for soccer practice and all the things? So it might not be that you're working so hard in a traditional role, but it's like, oh, you are the one that people call, when times of crisis. And if you're doing that for a lot of people, that's a lot of work. And it may feel supportive and um, you know, inherently part of who you are to be a caretaker in that way, and a privilege to be the person that someone calls in a crisis. Um, but just like looking at that, um, if this was, your last week of living, would you have felt like, oh, I wish I didn't work this hard. I wish I had more downtime. I wish I had more time to play. We all answer that for ourselves. Consciously bringing in a little bit more sacredness into our lives, which this Sangha is a way of doing that, bringing in that practice of being mindful, making space for that. You know, um, and Thich Nhat Hanh, he said, we are very good at preparing to live, but not very good at living. We know how to sacrifice 10 years for a diploma. We are willing to work very hard to get a job, a car, a house, and so on. But we have difficulty remembering that we are alive in the present moment, the only moment there is for us to be alive. And I really resonate with that, because I've spent a lot of years getting things, working hard, um, It's like, it's really important to come back to like, we only have this moment. And when we're like the striving type and the checking the to-do list and being efficient type, it can be hard to unlearn that behavior. And then the third, I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. That's a hard one, that can sometimes ruffle the feathers for people. And maybe we're not going to do it in a graceful way. Right speech being this ongoing practice. It's really easy to be meditating at the top of the mountain with nobody, or in a meditation retreat where there's zero talking. But then once we open our mouths and it's like, oh wow, that was unintended harm that I said, or we're hearing unintended harm, or sometimes intended harm in speech. So how can we be kind in our communication and still care for ourselves and honor our emotions, honor our feelings? Are we able to release bitterness and resentment? Is there forgiveness work to be done, repair work to be done, so that when we are dying, we can die in a peaceful way? Or if someone else is dying, you can feel good about your last interaction with them, and you can feel good that things weren't left unsaid, that they knew you, um, knew how you felt. So we have a book club with Befriending Death. That's a free book club that we offer monthly, and the next one is this month in August. Next week will be with a book called um, "The Four Things That Matter Most." And it's by Ira Byock, who's a palliative care physician. And he speaks of this, of these important phrases of, I'm sorry, I love you, please forgive me, I forgive you. And that's the repair work that can be done, so that when someone has died, or you're in the dying process, it's a little bit easier, because your emotions have been expressed. And Larry Yang, he has this really great phrase where he was one of my teachers at the Community Dharma Leader program, and there was a lot at the time. There was a lot of racial DEI issues that were kind of coming up, and he was in it. He was in it deep, and he wrote a book about it that was really beautiful. But he said, "May I be as loving and compassionate as I can be. If I can't be loving in this moment, may I be kind. And if I can't be kind, may I be non-judgmental. And if I can't be non-judgmental, may I not cause harm. And if I can't not cause harm, may I cause the least amount of harm as possible." And you can tell it's like unwrapping it. It's kind of like, all right, the high goal of being loving and compassionate. And when we're in it, when we're in conflict, and we're really clinging to our beliefs that we're right and they're wrong, or they need to see it my way, it can be really hard to be loving and compassionate. um but can I be non-judgmental, or can I just cause the least amount of harm as possible? Is there a way for me to get through that? So I like that for this third one that Bronnie Ware speaks of. If I wish I had the courage to express my feelings. And another, a lot of you might be familiar with the nonviolent communication practice that Martin Rosenberg started. Oren Sofer, he's a beautiful teacher, and he speaks a lot about communication, and he wrote a book called "Say What You Mean" that I highly recommend, if you're interested in digging into looking at how to have communication that's somewhat skillful. So I find it really helpful because he complements Dharma with and the mindfulness practice with nonviolent communication, and it feels really approachable to me, in getting to express your feelings and needs. And so the fourth one that Bronnie speaks of, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. And we speak of Kalyanamita, or spiritual friendships, which is what this Sangha is doing right here. Is some of you have been coming to this since Julie Webster started this years and years ago. So this beautiful friendships that come out of Sangha. And how do we maintain them? It's we've moved into this online process, and I know in that process we've lost some people who really appreciate being here in person. um, but we get to have people from all different walks of life. You can live on the East Coast, you could live in a different country, you don't have to be in Woodacre to show up to the women's group. um, and it's a funny thing to build friendships online. I was just in a wilderness retreat for 3 weeks. I was telling Christina, that was really beautiful. I was in Oregon with a lot of the Spirit Rock teachers through this Nature Dharma program that I'm involved in. And there's another mindfulness colleague that I teach for Banyan, and we've been friends online for 3 years. And I was like, I'm going to be in Portland, Oregon, driving through, can we meet? And it was just this beautiful thing to be with another friend who we had never we had never touched each other, we'd never hugged each other, it was just all virtual. And it's like a really beautiful deep friendship that we were colleagues with, over 3 years, and friends. And it's like, oh yeah, let's make that effort, let's make that happen. And sometimes it really does require some effort to stay in touch with your friends. But yeah, when you think of, like, if this was your last week, who who in your life would you have wanted to be in touch with, and what would you say to them? And what's stopping you from having that conversation or that phone call or that visit? Even better if you could do it in person. And then the last one, I wish I let myself be happier. I mean, what's that going to take? Cultivating play and joy and inclining the mind intentionally towards happiness. You know, for some of you, you might be fortunate enough to have little people, like grandchildren running around, that probably, or maybe even a child. I see, Grace, you've got like a little child there on the beach with your photo. Being around children can really just bring that natural wonder and awe at all the little things that their eyes and their minds take in. And we get to see new things with the beginner mind through children, or just finding our own child within ourselves of being goofy and playful and silly, and inclining the mind towards happiness, which is not always easy when there's war and conflict, and we're sensitive people taking in everything. And sometimes that does require some actual boundary setting of, like, okay, I'm going to take in the news for 5 or 10 minutes, and then I'm going to reorient and be with, like, the happy stories, because sometimes we don't learn about the happy stories with media. So yeah, I think that might be a good place to pause there. And I'd love to hear from some of you.